Stephen, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
A little bit of context and a disclaimer. Notion Capital is an investor in Griffin, and we've had a lot of help from Stephen over the last few years, so which we're very grateful for, and we can probably talk a little bit about it. And that's one of the reasons we invited you, is because we've had so much value from talking to you. Why don't we tell the rest of the world?
That's really kind of you. Thank you.
Phoebe, shall I hand over to you to kick things off?
Yeah. Should we let Stephen introduce himself? That was a stunning introduction, though, but it would be great to hear from Stephen more about him.
So I've been working in enterprise software for best part of 1,000 years now, I did start my working life in the 80s, so this is a long time coming. It's been extraordinary, really. I've that period is if you think about not quite middle of the 80s, late 80s through till now, wave after wave after kind of different technological advances. Had the joy of working in kind of some really interesting sales, marketing, leadership roles in some very early stage software companies. Founded my own very unsuccessfully in my 20s, and worked at Oracle. I ended up as European Marketing Director at Oracle after about 8 years. Then I worked at an amazing company called MessageLabs, which was the success story that went on to create Notion Capital. So one of the world's first SaaS companies. And that business grew from zero to best part of 150 million revenue in 8 years. And it's kind of nuts, right? When you think about that and that context, when it was acquired by Symantec in 2008, depending on who you ask, it was the second or third biggest SaaS company in the world. That's it. That's the end of the intro. No, but it was an amazing experience. It didn't actually feel that crazy. It was just work. I went to another company after that, and I did some kind of consulting work and advised other companies and what have you. What's been really interesting at Notion for 10 years, and my role at Notion, is basically how do we live up to our promise as being B2B software, business software, SaaS experts who are ex-operators, who add a lot of value. And my job and my team is to deliver on that promise for every investment. And I can honestly say I've learned more in the last, frankly, more in the last year than the previous 9, and way more in the last 10 than the previous 20. And it's a constant cycle of extraordinary founders doing previously unthinkable things, and I mean that in a very positive and constructive way, solving previously impossible problems. Imagining a future and designing a category, reinventing industries. And I've had the joy of working with about 100 of them in the last 10 years. And that's been incredible, including you guys.
People are very, very lucky to have Notion in their cap table. I think Mo and I can attest that we don't have favorites, but if we did, you'd be way up there.
Thank you.
So it's okay. What are you focused on in your work in Notion at the moment? You obviously have an amazing portfolio of companies, but the other thing that you guys have to do the most excellent job of is the minds that you bring together onto your platform, which we're very lucky to have accessed. But it would be really interesting to hear more about how you're building that out and what you do.
So in terms of what I'm obsessed about at the moment is probably the same as pretty much everybody, which is to say, what are the implications of how AI is going to change the way we start and build and scale companies over the next 10 plus years? And the reality is you've got to lean into the discomfort to say nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. It's kind of, sometimes it's a little bit kind of, feels like there's a sense that the rules have already been written in terms of how do you build teams, how do you go to market, how do you build product. And I don't buy it, and I don't think we'll know for many years to come. We certainly won't know how companies will scale and endure and be valued by public markets for like another 10 plus years. So that's kind of what I'm leaning into at the moment. And I've interviewed about 50 founders over the last 4 or 5 months on that. And I'm trying to get my head around what does it mean, and that's been a real joy, like a real joy. It's been the most extraordinary learning exercise, and I'm not I'm a commercial person. I've never written a line of code until about 3 weeks ago, when I built an application because I thought, well, I better, and that's just mind blowing. And then what my day job, like every month, maybe it's not quite every month, every 6 weeks, we start with a new company. And every time I want it to be better in terms of the experience. And trying to build on what I've been learning over the last 6 months and kind of 60 years, to be able to distill it down to things where you can really make a difference. And the application of AI in that, for me, has just been mind blowing, because I can take 50 DD documents and put them into a kind of an AI machine. I can interrogate it, can ask it questions with clear instructions to give me kind of facts and data on those companies. And so that's been really amazing. So that's what I've been spending most of my time doing over the last 6 months, probably. And then, the collective is quite extraordinary, because what's interesting about our portfolio is that there's 100 companies. There's nobody doing what Griffin is doing. There's no one doing what company UpCity I just kicked off with yesterday is doing. Nobody's doing what they're doing, and you're all very, very different, but you have a huge amount in common. And I think the combination of the commonality and the trust allows us to bring people together to say, hey, as I've done with you, Phoebe, you should meet Simi, and Phoebe, why don't you meet Jennifer, and Phoebe, why don't you come to this event and meet these people? And you learn through kind of peer groups, and that's something that's been extraordinarily valuable and rewarding to see.
I mean, I can say we had so much help from Rob, who you introduced us to, Stephen, on the RevOps side, on building an MVP of a RevOps engine to track the early stage go-to-market process.
And that's a very common problem across every single company. And it's not to say that I'm solving those problems, but I sure as hell know people who can solve them for you. And here's Rob. But we can do that on so many different things, because the problems are nearly always the same.
That's a nice update, actually. One of your introductions is now speaking on a panel with me next week, because they were asking for recommendations, and I was kind of going through my list, and I was like, I've got it. So you're powering conferences now as well.
Thank you. I'll take it. I'll take it.
What's the coolest thing you've used AI for recently? So you've written your first application, but what's been the coolest thing?
I honestly think it was really interesting, and I had a really funny moment. Yeah, so I am a bit of a Luddite, really, but I do find it fascinating using AI. Yeah, I built an application for one of our portfolio companies just to show I could, which was to analyze about 200 sales scripts for quantitative and qualitative analysis. And that was really cool. It's like, it was a piece of deep work. It took me about 6 hours, and I loved it. There was literally no interruptions, and not even any coffee, So that's really interesting. And what I found most interesting about the experience, I'm trying to create a kind of an AI platform for my platform, if that makes sense, to say, can I create a learning engine for myself and for the companies I'm working with? And it's been quite hard preparing to meet new founders, because we have one every 6 weeks, and I don't get involved in the DD and the prep and the background. I don't do the reference calls, etc. And they're all there, but I mean, good luck going through like 50 documents and keeping it all in your head. So I just dump them all into Anthropic with permission from my compliance team, I have to say. And just started. I've created a series of prompts to allow me to identify the things I want to understand, and then I actually, some of the things I've learned from all the interviews I've done around kind of the founders and how they're thinking about AI, I applied that to it and said, how are these guys doing on these things? Where are the red flags? But actually, to bring the very first conversation just down to, here are 3 things I think are really, really interesting that I think we should talk about and we can really help you on. And that's it, really. That's probably the single best thing. And he was like, he felt heard. We'd spent the time. And what was interesting is I probably spent more time preparing for that than I did previously, because previously it was so hard. Whereas this was joyous, right? It was such good fun. And I think that's one of the things I think people underestimate is if you turn this into a collaborator, it can be a really, really powerful experience. So many caveats. I mean, honestly, some of the stuff that comes out, you go, I don't know, where on earth did you get that from? But it was a really great experience. And then proposing to go forward to say, right, can I maintain? I've taken the transcript from that first meeting and put it into the same engine. Put the email I sent into the same engine. Put the documents and collateral we're delivering into the same engine. So who knows what that will give me in 12 months? I don't know, but that's really interesting. And then when I've done that with a dozen companies, that'll be interesting too. So yeah, long-winded.
No, but it moves very quickly. And to your point of that 12 months is like, goodness knows what these models and the context windows and things, what that will be in 12 months and how much more leverage.
One of the founders, the CTO founders, said to me something which I really, really loved. He said, what you've got to appreciate, Stephen, is we're doing things now that were impossible yesterday. Using yesterday as like a shortcut, he said, and even if they're not possible today, they may well be possible tomorrow. And so that pace of intentional obsolescence of your product, I think is going to be really, really challenging, because I mean, who knows what a product even is in like 5 years' time? The problem remains. That's what you solve. How do we solve this problem? How we define the problem we solve for the customer? How do we deliver the value and the outcome we want? The product will need to be reinvented on a constant basis, and I think that's critical, because the pace of obsolescence and the pace of competition is just going through the roof. And if you're not obsoleting yourself, your product, and reinventing it and yourselves, you will be overtaken. I have no doubt about that. And I think we used to work years ago in terms of 3-year cycles for reinventing a platform, and maybe an annual release cycle, which is about kind of maintenance as opposed to kind of new features and functions. Oversimplifying. That's gone. That's entirely gone.
Do you think that founders these days, do you think they need to change how they think about developing software because of this? Do you think the paradigm that existed maybe over the last kind of 10 years or so, that's going to completely shift, and the move into speed and, like you say, this intentional obsolescence is the new mindset?
Yes and no, because I mean, obviously, speed without direction is meaningless. I mean, you can have enormous speed going in completely the wrong direction. So I think there is a real balance there in terms of saying, what really matters, what aligns to solving the problem, or what is it that's going to allow this customer to be even more successful. But I think what is certainly changing is the speed of prototyping, right? To spin up a prototype and to do it in 24 hours max, and to put that in front of the customer and say, this is what we're thinking and how it would be. We'd love to get your feedback. And then taking it back and putting it into the roadmap. I mean, you guys are doing something really, really serious and important, right? This is non-trivial. So there's huge security implications. There's huge authentication problems. There's huge integration problems. Right. Let's not trivialize that stuff by saying we're going to, that someone like me is going to create that. But I think in terms of accelerating product development cycles, 100%. I think I don't know enough about kind of deep, coding, but what I hear is that there is definitely productivity performances. Some people, let's say, if you took a quality engineer who might be saying, "Well, I'm identifying kind of problems," they can be empowered possibly to fix that problem without having to go to the rest of the engineering team. And I've had that from CTOs saying that person is probably 10x, and they're really, really happy. And I think that's one of the interesting things about it is a lot of the people I'm talking to in the development world saying this is really good fun, right? It's really good fun, rich work. We can really deliver stuff, but speed without direction is kind of pointless. But that concept of reinvention and deliberate obsolescence, yeah, I think so.
It is fascinating how it's moving. I was also dabbling with vibe coding a few weeks ago, and I couldn't believe how far along the journey I could get. And even some documentation on websites, they had like copyable LLM prompts. I was like, we are in the new world.
I think what it does is I think it really it heightens the emphasis on the things that really matter, right? So what is the problem I solve for the customer I choose to serve, and what is the extraordinary value that I deliver? And that doesn't go. In fact, those things are really more important, and the problem is more important than the product. Products are ephemeral, right? A problem is permanent. But I think that's not enough, so you've got the paranoia, you've got the reinvention, you've got the focus on the obsolescence, etc. It's still not enough. I think what I'm hearing from people saying is we really need to think about defensibility. What is it gives us real power? What's going to make us really hard to shift? What's going to give us the ability to maintain our price differential in the market because we're a premium price? You will not do that unless you have real competitive moats, defensibility, market power that says we're, very, very hard to shift because one, our customers love us, and two, we're doing something that is deeply, deeply difficult to address, to solve. So I think obsolescence and reinvention, but defensibility and market power, I think we've really, really got to put more thought into that.
That makes sense. I mean, we could talk about AI all day. It's absolutely fascinating, and I personally love following along and trying new things. One thing we did want to talk about, Stephen, was, you've mentioned already the number of founders that you speak to, the number of companies that you speak to, and some incredible companies in the Notion portfolio as well.
Yeah.
You relatively recently, you and the team came out with a super interesting report talking about how to scale from 1 million ARR to 100 million ARR, and you've interviewed a whole host of founders about that. It would be really cool if you could maybe just talk a little bit about like what you did, what some of the kind of key findings were for you, and how do people apply those in today's world?
Yeah. So obviously, if you think about the kind of big picture, if you go back over like 20 years, there's pretty good evidence in terms of, how many companies were founded and how many raised X amount of money and how many achieved 100 million revenue, how many achieved $1 billion kind of exit or outcome. And it's about 1% of companies that will raise more than 3 million. That's not even the top of the number, right? Because the vast majority of companies found, quite rightly, don't raise capital. So we looked at a cohort of about 14,000 companies over about a 20-year period, and about 1% had achieved some kind of big outcome, i.e. 100 million revenue or $1 billion exit, and 1 in 125 had achieved 100 million revenue in less than 10 years. Now, what I think is interesting is if you think about, I'm sorry to bang on about AI again a little bit, but it's making the market so much bigger. So you're bringing problems. Problems are now addressable in kind of professional services businesses, in fintech, in hardware software interfaces that dwarf the size of the SaaS world. So the top of the market is increasing, and the number of companies that's being created is increasing as well. Whether that will mean more companies coming out of the bottom that are extraordinary and hundreds of millions or billions in revenue, who knows? I struggle to think that the percentage will change much, but therefore the number might be bigger. But then that does lead me to think, where are those companies going to end? Public markets can't consume thousands of companies, and strategic acquirers can't buy thousands and thousands of companies. So there's some really meta kind of problems to resolve. So I interviewed about 20 European CEOs who were in that cohort who've achieved like 100 million plus, and I picked up, there were some really interesting insights in there. There was one of the things that fascinated me the most, which was the importance every single one of them put on focus. And in particular, there were a gentleman called Avi Mayer, who's the CEO of TravelPerk. And he said, the thing with B2B, he said, Stephen, is like, and I could never be a B2C founder, is like, once I'd figured out the problem I solved, and I'd figured out the customers I solved it for, and I figured out the value I delivered, I just execute upon that. And then when I started looking for that, it was quite interesting. When I talked to most of the companies about hey, how did you get from 30 to 100 million? It was like, we didn't change a lot. We just executed really well. That's not, obviously they're telling a bit of a story, but focus and execution. A lot of talk about clarity and alignment, making sure everybody pulling in the right direction. A couple of things that were really fascinating to hear was over and over and over again, the words gut instinct or intuition. And I think that speaks really critically to something I think that's vital in this current era, which is, I think there's a real risk of believing that building technology companies is a very linear, logical, mathematical, scientific process. The reality is you're doing something nobody's ever done before. You're making decisions based upon limited amounts of information about what's happened, but you don't. None of us are very good at predicting the future, right? And so you have to make bets. And what staggered me was the sophistication of the intuition of these founders. And it's not gut instinct, it's learned, right? It's learned. They know their businesses, they know their markets. And that was really, really exciting. And then I think the third thing was, not almost without exception, every single one of them said 100 million is just the start. Because if you assume that, and most of them have low single digit market share, because obviously you might start in the UK and then you expand and then you expand. They've increased their TAM somewhat. Even someone like Muse, which has got 400 million revenues, probably got, I don't know, I'd be making it up, single digit market share. Why would you stop? They don't want to stop. None of them wanted to stop. They wanted to build really big businesses, and something that, words they used, endured beyond them. So yeah, I think those, like, focus, insight, clarity, ambition.
I think it's really interesting to kind of the focus and the intuition. and understanding where you make an impact, continue to make that impact seems quite impossible when you start out. I was at Griffin probably too long now, but from the very early days where we were going to get a bank license in 18 months and take over the world, and 6 years later we are making tentative steps to take over the world.
I mean, it's hard, and it actually came out. We needed to spend the time to figure out where the focus was.
Yeah.
Something I think which is really important to kind of lean into is you never really know, right? You don't know whether this is the best decision. You just know it's a good decision or a bad decision, and it kind of works or it doesn't. So do it until it doesn't, And there's this, I think, decision making in that context is a really important skill. Not one I'd say I would thrive at, but then I'm not a founder and CEO, so that's good.
One thing that we learned as Griffin, maybe not as the founders, but Mo and I, kind of mobilizing go-to-market as we were pre-launch, we were pleasantly surprised about product market fit that we'd never thought about. We had a very clear view of what we thought product market fit would be. And by chance, an inbound email came in that took us down into a completely different sector, which we hadn't considered would be core to our business. And it just so happened there'd been a regulation change and then a few other kind of market condition pieces that came together and built the strongest kind of validation of product market fit we've had to date.
Brilliant. I love that. A chance. Serendipity. Good luck. Yeah.
And I think, admittedly, like some of our initial strategy was correct. We've made inroads in the markets and the sectors that we thought we would. But one thing that I think we've become very open to, and as we've been trying to scale Griffin's kind of revenue function and its journey, is that you get stuff from left field, which is a blessing, and you would never have put money on that kind of coming through. So I think it's really interesting kind of where those founders, where they work out what they can execute on and then execute on really well, and it's the focus. But the journey to get to that has been,
it's hard.
It's pretty wild.
I think it's a constant balance between exploring and exploiting. That says, eyes wide open to what the opportunity could be, but this works, so we're executing on this. But we're still open to the fact that this is it's unlikely to be the very, very best idea you could possibly have had, but it's pretty good and it works. But don't lose sight of the fact that you just don't know, and that doesn't mean you're not focused, because there are ways you can execute with degrees of confidence that will allow you to say, well, this we know works, this we think will work, this might work, and then you deploy resources accordingly against that. And that's great examples of companies that have done that really well. Currency Cloud, Nick Cheetham at Currency Cloud did that exceptionally well. I know this market, we have go-to-market fit, it's huge, I'm ramping it up. We've got product market fit, we don't have go-to-market fit, we're investing. This one, it's a bet, we don't know, and you manage accordingly.
It's very interesting you split those out, Stephen, the product market fit and the go-to-market fit, because we always hear product market fit. That's like, on everyone's lips, but go-to-market fit isn't spoken about anywhere near as much. No. At least, I don't know, in my experience. But yeah, how do you describe go-to-market fit? Yeah.
I know exactly who my best customers are. I know how to sell and why they buy and how they buy. It's probably a better way to describe it. I understand exactly the levers I can pull to attract them to me, to engage them, to convert them. And I've got the processes for this down so pat that I can bring in another seller, bring in another business development person, bring in another. As they come to the decision-making point, I really know how to do really, really great qualification and discovery and to set them up for success. And I know how onboarding works. I know how long it takes. I know how to do it repeatedly, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that kind of rigor around best customer process, understanding how to apply the right resources, and having the confidence to be able to say, okay, go to market fit means I can put another resource in here. I can put another resource in here. I can put 3 in here. I can start to scale predictably.
That's so important. That, I mean, yeah, we're at this really cool part of the journey where we're thinking about these things. That does make a lot of sense. Yeah. What common pitfalls do you see startups and founders kind of suffering from, or are there any traps that you see along that scaling journey that you often try and avoid, tell founders to avoid?
A lot of it comes down to two things, but there's a certain set of capabilities you need to build and people you need to employ to get you to a point in time. And then there comes a point on the journey where what got you to there won't get you to there. And so continuing in a linear fashion, that's quite problematic, because most of us don't scale in the kind of way that businesses need to. But it's nearly always people problems, and overhiring in terms of number and seniority, I think is every single time is over and over again, and it's still the biggest cost for every organization, and I think that's the most common. I think the second, which I think is getting better, is there's too much playbook thinking that says, this is how something worked in that company or my previous company, and I'm going to apply that to Griffin. Griffin is unique, right? You've learned the hard way that your ability to acquire and convert and make a customer successful there is nobody else doing it like you. And that's the reality of it, right? You create your own principles and practices and playbooks. You don't copy anybody else's. So I think that's a second. And I suppose maybe I'm assuming product market fit and go to market fit in one segment means the same in another. I think that's very common.
Very, very wise things for founders listening to take heed of. Yeah. I think especially in a kind of platform business like ours, where like moving money, like who doesn't move money? Everyone moves money. It's kind of so tempting sometimes to be like, oh, we'll just jump into that next sector and it'll all be fine. They move money, right? Just like, but then, okay, no, there's intricacies, there's nuance, there's a slightly different regulation that we might not have known about. And I mean, this is where Phoebe's incredible, because you essentially set up the bank, and the regulations so well, and you can create solutions for different sectors. But yeah, as you say, Stephen, it's not a copy paste kind of model.
No,
yeah,
not at all.
Yeah, we are approaching time, and we could go on for a long time. But I know you need to run as well. What are you most excited about, Stephen? What's between now and, say, I don't know, the end of the year or the next 6 months? What are you really looking forward to seeing in your role?
I mean, I've spoken about it a lot, right? Which is to say, I think we can really, I'd like to think we can really increase the not trajectory, but the kind of like the experience of working with a VC, which is constructive and positive and valuable and impactful. I think we can accelerate that, and I think it's a difficult line to walk, because I'm not in your business, right? And I know you well because we've been working together. We invested in you 3 years ago, and but we might talk once a month for like half an hour. And you're working, 100 hours a week, and you've got, 100 people doing the same thing. So don't kid yourself, right? Don't kid yourself. But I think what I really like the idea of is being able to kind of just increase the probability of success for companies just a little bit more and a little bit more. And and learn from each company we invest in to help us to do that better and better. And I mean, that's no different from what I've been doing for the last 10 years. But the ability to do it now is so much greater. And, you know, the temptation is to do a lot, but I think the real value is to try and isolate the 2 or 3 things that really, really are going to make a difference to a founder. And if we can do that in the first 12 months, then, you know, 10 years time, they might look back and they said, do you know that those guys were really helpful? That's kind of what I want. Taking money from Notion Capital was a really, really good decision. And we wouldn't have, I don't think we'd have had this scale of outcome without their support. That'd be nice. But that's a way off.
Well, hopefully in a few years, when we do another one of these episodes, we can be saying basically.
I'll hold you to that.
Yeah, we'll just title it Notion's Biggest Fans.
Yeah.
Success story.
Hey, it's a long list. It's a long list.
We're gonna have to get very competitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is the
exactly.
super fan of all super
Yes. No, you have to be, you know, very accepting of the highs and lows, and very kind of conscious of the fact that these are your businesses and your decisions and your outcomes, but we have the joy of kind of like, you know, playing a part along the way.
Amazing. Stephen, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk. If you are a founder with a term sheet from Notion, take it. But genuinely, thank you so much for all of your help. We look forward to more of it, and we hope we can show you some incredible new products and stories very soon. But yeah, thank you so much, Stephen.
Pleasure.